Russia has been stepping up its aerial attacks, now increasingly during daylight hours. The latest salvo on Friday left 10 dead in a barrage of more than 500 drones and dozens of missiles. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy had offered Russia an Easter truce. Now he's accusing Moscow of an Easter escalation.
Rescue workers rushed to save animals from a veterinary clinic. Located in the Kyiv region, the building was struck in broad daylight, reportedly killing around 20 animals. Just one of dozens of attacks across Ukraine in recent days. The city of Kharkiv, just 40 kilometers from the Russian border, was again one of the main targets.
Shelling continues for the second day in a row. Yesterday, 27 people were wounded. Today, at this site of the attack, 6 people were wounded in the strike, and 1 person died in hospital.
Ukraine's emergency responders say Russia is deploying Iranian-made Shahed drones, which are difficult for air defences to intercept. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy called it a deliberate Easter escalation.
This is the Russians' response to our proposal for a ceasefire over the Easter holidays. Ukraine openly made the proposal to Russia, and Russia responds with Shahed drones and continues terrorist operations against our energy sector, against our infrastructure.
Despite the aerial attacks, military analysts say Russia failed to make any territorial gains in March for the first time in 2.5 years. Russia's advance has seemingly stalled as Ukrainian forces recapture square kilometers of lost ground. Ukraine is also sending its own drones deep behind enemy lines, this week striking an oil refinery in the Russian Republic of Bashkortostan.
And Kira Rudik is a member of Ukrainian parliament and leader of political parties Holos. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to actually begin with you because we had a statistic just come in the past hour. We're hearing that Russia made nearly no territorial gains in Ukraine in March for the first time in 2.5 years. And I'm just wondering what your reaction might be to that.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. Indeed, we have been telling the whole world since the day one that Russia is not invincible and that with enough help and support, with enough pressure to weaken Russia, we can regain our territories and we can actually win the war. And for us here in Ukraine, things didn't change much. We are still here with this resolve. We are supporting our army and hoping that they will be able to deliver. Russia is indeed weakened by the sanctions. And of course, they were weakened by the cancellation of their network connectivities by Starlinks. So our military are using this opportunity. However, again, the influx of cash that they were getting because of the lifting sanctions and because of the oil price may allow them to continue the war, may allow them to bring in more recruits and purchase and manufacture more weapons. So though we are obviously congratulating our military, I think we are not at the point where we should be extremely happy.
In fact, Zelenskyy, and to your point, has accused Russia of an Easter escalation instead of a truce. Officials are now saying that Putin is changing tactics, that he's trying to increase civilian suffering, shifting to daytime barrages, and preparing to target more key infrastructure in Ukraine. How bad is that situation at the moment?
I wouldn't call it changing tactics because it was like that since the beginning when Russia would not have significant gains at the battlefield, and they will try to compensate for that by terrorizing peaceful cities and killing more and more civilians. With that, it didn't change. What changed indeed is that they have started attacking civilian trains. Even today, there was a couple of attacks. And when this happens, the trains stop and people get out just to the woods or to the fields whenever they are. And I experienced it myself, and I can tell you this is absolutely devastating when you're in the middle of nowhere and you have to get out just with your passport to the middle of nowhere in any weather, and you're feeling absolutely terrified because you have nowhere to hide and you don't know what's going to happen. Today is day 1500 since the beginning of full-scale invasion, and Russia continues committing war crimes, continues targeting civilians, and they have not gained any significant achievements over the last year in terms of the battlefield.
Zelensky has signaled Kyiv's openness to a potential Easter truce. The holiday is celebrated on April 12th in Ukraine and in Russia. And I'm wondering how hopeful you are that that might happen.
You see, over the last something years, we remember that even if Russia agrees to sort of truce for the New Year or Christmas, they will definitely break it to create more havoc, to create more frustration and destruction. So even if there was an agreement, I would be very cautious, and I would still warn people around me to be very careful and to listen to the air raid sirens, and to be extremely careful and take care of the people that they are responsible for. Because again, we have been in those so-called truces and ceasefires with Russia dozens of times since 20.
Okay, I was speaking there with Kira Rudik, a member of the Ukrainian parliament and leader of the political party Holos. We were discussing the situation in Ukraine, and especially as we have been seeing increased aerial bombardment in the lead up to Easter. And I think my team is trying to re-get the line with her, but I don't think we're going to. Let me see. Perhaps we have her. Kira, I hope you can hear me. Yes. This is Sarah Kelly at DW News. You know, one thing that we're talking about the situation in Ukraine, but one thing that I'm really curious to ask you about is the dynamic now with the ongoing war in Iran and the shift in focus, the shift in the headlines. President Trump has blasted NATO allies for not joining the war against Iran. He has said that Ukraine is not his war, but Europe's problem. How worried are people in Ukraine about talk like that?
Obviously, people are really worried because we know that the support from the United States is critical for us, and securing the support of European partners is something that we desperately need to be able to continue fighting for our lives. However, again, Iran has been an open ally of Russia, and we hope that in the long term, weakening Iran may come in our favor. What is indeed very upsetting that it doesn't seem that American president recognizes that Russia and Iran are allies and they are supporting each other, putting American forces in the harm's way. This is indeed a very complicated situation, which in a short term is definitely harmful for Ukraine, especially that now we have to compete for the air defense systems with the Gulf countries, and we do not know what's going to happen with the sanctions. The first thing is that the sanctions were lifted for some Russian gas and oil, and they have received this influx of cash that they will obviously use again to create death and destruction in Ukraine.
Kira Rudik, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us here on DW News to give us a better sense of what is happening in your country.